Family podcast or listening, I suppose. And I'm joined today by my dad over here next to me. On the far side is my brother Paul. And we're going to talk today about boycotts. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation because I think we're going to talk a bit about the morality of boycotts in our opinions and also the economic effect that can happen from personal or bigger boycotts of different companies. Does it make any sense at all, etc. Before we get going, I do want to say that these are our opinions. We don't mean to judge anybody. If I say I don't shop at Amazon, I'm not trying to say you go to hell if you shop at Amazon. That's definitely not the point. My point of the show is to talk about a discussion that I think is interesting, thought provoking, and hopefully something that people will go home or sit there at home, think about a little bit more, and perhaps come to some decisions on companies that maybe you will no longer want to shop with. So, Dad, Paul, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks
Anybody
for
else is
having me.
here? And I guess the question comes down to, again, I guess, Dad, maybe I'll ask you this because you mentioned the Legion of Decency. So I think we'll start real quickly with the moral side and then end up in the economic side. And what was the Legion of Decency and why do we no longer have it?
Well, and basically the point I think that I was trying to make by even bringing up the Legion of Decency is that when you look at boycotts and you look at the effectiveness of them, I think what you have to take a look at is something that Andy Heisman, when he's on your show, has made a good point a couple of times, that you want to be effective in terms of actually bringing about change, right? So there was a time, I think, when your so-called your moral majority, your Catholic majority, we weren't never a majority in the country, but I mean, you're basically your virtuous souls had were able to rally around and operate as a group, as a unit, and kind of around the Catholic Church in terms of basically taking what amounted to a boycott to Hollywood. And what they did is they had this Legion of Decency. It was something that was sponsored by clergy and laity, and you had a huge amount of involvement. But when a particular movie, or even books would be placed on a list, a naughty list, I forget the name of the list, but basically your Catholics would especially be discouraged from going and seeing the movies. And this had a really, in its day, it had a strong impact on Hollywood. And you saw in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when the Legion of Decency was strong, you saw a lot of movies that featured religious, and you saw movies could basically be shunned more or less from society, and it was a way of helping to keep morality in Hollywood higher than it would have been otherwise. Okay, that kind of broke down with Vatican II, and basically we started to kind of, as a world, disperse a little bit. And I think that there was one more. I want to say there was one more big effort at that same kind of a boycott. And if you remember, 1995, I think it was, the Southern Baptists announced a boycott against Disney. They took on Disney, and I think it went on. I read it went on for 8 years, and really, honestly, I think at that point, as a people, we had kind of lost that moral. The numbers, we had lost the intensity, we had lost the collaboration, and these corporations like Disney and whatnot were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, I mean, to the extent that the Southern Baptist boycott of Disney was effective, it wasn't much more than a flesh wound on Disney. And Disney really, made it through without relatively unscathed. So since then, I mean, you've seen efforts to try to boycott Target, boycott, all these different companies. And I think as the corporations get bigger and bigger, and your movements toward boycotts are getting smaller and smaller, I think these boycotts now are having less and less effect, to the point where I just don't see anymore where boycotts are a particularly effective way to try to bring about the kind of change that we want to try to bring about in our economic system.
And Paul, would you agree with that? I mean, you think that boycotts in general just don't really work?
Well, I think the real question we have to solve here is, why aren't we talking about girl cots?
It's a good question. Let's not discriminate.
Okay, so girl cuts.
Right. Boy slash
So
girl cuts, right?
That's right.
yeah, so boycotts I think are basically the same equivalent as your say a super PAC, right? So if you're saying that it's okay to come together to band over something you believe in, to pay money to affect change with a super PAC, then it's the same moral equivalent to do the exact opposite. So I think that in terms of creating change, if that's your tool of creating change for something that you believe in, so do others. I think that I think it's well to do. I think that's fine as long as you're living within your own, moral compass, I suppose. But like Dad said, I think that they probably have very little effect other than creating some media buzz from time to time.
Right.
I'm gonna cough real
And-
quick. Sorry.
No worries. And is that, I guess the question is that effect actually going to be a positive for Target? So as they say, any news is good news. I mean, is that necessarily the case? I mean, I think Target's a good example because of the whole, transgender bathrooms or whatever, and they got a huge ton of publicity. And I think their stocks dropped for a short time, but they definitely didn't go out of business or anything. So I guess even any sort of publicity, is it even helping the company who you disagree with?
You could play that game and get sucked into that tailspin for forever if you do that. But
Yeah.
Right.
so I mean, so Nicole and I have an unofficial boycott with Best Buy, and that's because we've had numerous terrible experiences with Best Buy. So we hate going there.
Yeah.
So if you've got enough businesses that create bad experiences like that, they're going to create their own unofficial boycotts. I don't think
that's
you need to. You don't
that's
need
the
to
free
hold a
market.
picket outside. Yeah,
No,
yeah. You
that's
don't
the
need
free
to
market
necessarily hold a
speaking,
picket. Right.
Yeah, we're the Sprint is our company. We'll never ever do business with Sprint.
Yeah.
And so then I guess that's one of the primary questions of the show. I mean, if that's the case, just because of the quality of a product or the quality of customer service, is that something that we should also think about in terms of the morality of the company? I mean,
Right.
if you boycott these companies because they didn't, help you out in time, or everything they give you is garbage, that's a personal decision to boycott them, even though it's not going to have an impact on their bottom line, right? Or very little impact. And so I guess, is it worth it to look into these companies and say, hey, this is something I do or do not want to, give my money to?
Yeah, I think that's well and fine to do if that's something that's really important to you, as long as you're not judging others who don't do that, like you said at the beginning of your show. Because if you look at the clothes you're wearing, or the bookcase behind you, or the electronics you have on your head, I've got an iPhone in front of me. It's not just Apple that I pay money to, right? It's the other 150 organizations and giant companies that have, I don't know what their morality stances are, but they all work together in this huge global supply chain. So if you start getting sucked into that, you're a goner.
Right. And really, my case here, Kevin, is, and this is one where honestly I probably preach this better than I practice it, but I think that what we can do is we can make some micro decisions, right? So for us, I mean, we've got 25 minutes away or so, we've got a Walmart, and then we probably another 25 minutes away, or even a little bit closer, we've got a little grocery store called Fairway. And Fairway, they're small, they're locally owned. I think that they seem to give back to the community. They seem to be a good place to go. But I mean, okay, so if we're just going out for groceries, we don't do a great job of it. We try to get out to Fairway to do it, even though we're going to pay a little bit more. Okay, it's something where we can talk with our wallets. But dadgummit, it's like you go out and you've always got something that you need to get that Fairway's not going to have, and Walmart is. And so by default, you kind of end up back at Walmart. But I think that is those types of decisions that we can make, where we start to try to get more local in our buying and try to buy from people that we know, or who are part of the community.
Well, and to Fairway, their owner, as far as you know, maybe they're dealing drugs on the side, right? I doubt it, but
Yeah, it's possible.
yeah. I think,
but that's an interesting question though, because if they were, and this is one of the issues with the globalist market in general, is that you really have very little idea of who has any connection with anything. And real quickly, TR, I see you say there's a bad echo. My wife's sitting right next to me listening to the stream, and she says it's okay. So maybe it's coming from your side. She has headphones on, so hopefully the stream is okay. But she's listening right next to me. She says it's okay. But it's a good question. I mean, because if you're buying local and you find out the guy down the street at the grocery store is a total punk, or or selling drugs or whatever,
Right.
you can really have a direct effect on them, because you probably know them personally. You probably know this guy's a loser, and you can really go and tell everybody, hey, I'm not going to shop here. You shouldn't either. And so I think in the end, that's almost one of the biggest issues, in my opinion. And there's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is. The global industry is just gigantic, and that's going to be probably the rest of our lives. But I think that it is actually a problem. It's the same, I think, in terms of being the same as it is with local government, that governments have gotten so big, you don't even know who's in charge anymore. I mean, look at the UN here. It's like, or the EU. It's like, who on earth is in? I don't know who's in charge of the EU. I don't vote for them, but they have a lot to say about my life. Now, if it was someone down the road and they're telling me what to do, I could go over there and smack them in the face and say, hey, you better shape up or else. And I think it's kind of the same with a big market.
Yeah. So here, I'm going to try to impress you here. Marcus Aurelius of Gladiator fame. He's got a great quote that I'm going to have to paraphrase, but he basically says that every action should be judged for the action itself. So you've got your all kinds of intent that goes into it, but at the end of the day, you should just judge your own actions and live within your own moral compass, as long as your moral compass is working. So I think that having this discussion is good, but I think it can be far more complicated than it ought to be.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. That, again, me saying, hey, I hate Amazon, I boycott Amazon, I don't think, as you say, everyone has their own judgments in terms of what is justified morally and whatnot too, and that I would never even attempt to try to preach that. But I do think, I guess my point for the show is to get people to think about it, because I think the question is, why do we buy what we buy? Why do we shop where we shop? I had a show on a couple of weeks ago about why we wear what we wear. And you both know very well, Paul, you know very well that I for most of my life, I didn't care at all what I put on my body, not even a little bit. And it took me, 30 years to figure that out, that it does matter. It does matter, what you put on, because it's what you're showing to the rest of the world, I suppose. And I think that it's just an idea of thinking about it, I think, has improved me as a person, because I put it into my mind, why am I doing this? And so that's what, I guess that's my question here is, why would I buy at Amazon? I mean, I guess I'd ask you guys, I imagine you guys use Amazon. Most everybody does. Why do you use Amazon?
Because it's better than almost anything else out there, and cheaper and faster.
Well, and faster.
Okay, yeah. Right.
It is that. So what you got to do, Kevin, and this is where it comes down to that moral decision, is if you've decided that Amazon is that hill to die on. Okay, you're going to be looking. You're going to be sourcing. You want to buy four or five different things. You're going to be going to 4 or 5 different local websites. You may have to go out and get in the car and buy something, or you might be able to have it delivered. You're going to probably pay more for shipping. It's going to cost you time. But if that time and that extra money is worth it for you, as this is to Paul's point, if it's worth it to you, then I'd say it's worth it. For me, that's not my hill to die on.
The thing you also have to consider too is that Amazon has created an unprecedented opportunity for market access for small business owners that has never ever been like that in the history of small business owners. I don't know what the number is, but there are so many mom and pop stores, like you're talking about, Kevin, that sell on Amazon that would not be able to survive without it. So that's one thing to consider too in your algorithm.
And has that also been the case during the pandemic? Because I guess I always hear these horror stories of Amazon growing exponentially and mom and pop shops shutting down. I mean, is that something that has that not directly affected them?
If they're not adapting, yeah, absolutely. That's what big companies and advancements in processes and technology force the market to adapt. Without that, we'd still be riding our horse-drawn carriages. So
That'd be kind of nice.
Were there people upset when the Model T started taking over? Yeah. Sure am glad the Model T took over and we're not driving buggies anymore, so just the way it works. Sam Walton used to run a mom and pop store.
Right.
But he just did it better than anyone else.
But it's an interesting question, though, because the globalism and the Model T is actually a good example of there has been pretty direct immorality from these inventions. I mean the industrial, I guess not necessarily cars, but the Industrial Revolution has really, really done a number on shaping the world as we know it today. And in terms of the products we get and the ease with which we live and communicate, et cetera, of course, it's exponentially, it's not even in the same ballpark. But in terms of even quality of life or even the quality of the products we get, I think that's fairly questionable. I mean, the products that you get from the local grocery store, especially in the US, I mean, are they better? They're definitely not better than they were 100 years ago. I mean, it helps us. We can do more. We can travel faster and go. I wouldn't be in Germany. I wouldn't have the life I have, obviously. But we've lost a lot from it too.
Yeah, and one of the things I would say, Kevin, and this is a little bit of I don't know, I guess a hot button item for me is I think one of the major overarching societal transformation or trends over the last 100 years for me has been private property ownership, and I think that what has happened is with capitalism, especially, we have seen property ownership getting consolidated into the hands of the government, of corporations, of huge landowners and all that. We're even seeing that now where if I want to get a 5 acres of farmable land in Iowa, I mean, I can't do it. It's ridiculously expensive and it would barely make the money back over the course of time. So I'm a believer in, I mean, the theory, at least, I mean, the practice of it is very, very difficult, but the theory of Hilaire Belloc and distributism, where the orientation of the government really should be towards maximizing the private property ownership of individuals and to the point where they can take over and basically once you have to till your own land, you have to work your own land. I mean, that sparks in a man the need, the ability, I think, or the desire to contribute to make things, to basically do what I need to do to make this land work. And I think as we've gone completely the other direction, we have seen not only land ownership consolidated at a corporate and government level, but you see power go with it. And so now you do see these large corporations get so big that I don't think they're even intentionally going out and undercutting small mom and pop shops, but they just have such basically such supply chains that they got such an ability to mass produce and to sell things in such incredible bulk that eventually they take over, and that's what we're seeing now. And the mom and pop shop just can't, they can't survive. They can't go on.
But Paul would say that they would improve even because they can sell their goods on the Amazon marketplace, right?
Well, that's a local. Yeah.
They don't have the economies of scale yet, so they can't sell things as cheaply as other people who mass produce. But the goal is to one day get there. So you get there by finding efficiencies, by improving your processes, increasing your technology, and that's how we advance as society in general. I mean,
is mass production improving as society? I mean, I think that's an interesting question in itself. I mean, is it good that one company can make all of this stuff and usually make it pretty crappy and then produce it and give it to the world and sell it cheaper? And people are, so, I mean, I think there's a consumerism issue that people especially in the US, but I think everywhere, I'm sure that they want it fast, they want it cheap. And I think that those are the two primary things. They don't think about, who made it. And that's hard to even know. I understand. But I think there's not a whole lot of thought that goes into it. And I work at Deutsche Post, so I deliver the mail. I can tell you very well I can tell you very well what people order and how often it's on Amazon, et cetera. And I think becomes an issue that I see how many times people send stuff back as well. There's not a whole lot of thought that goes into it, because you can just click a button and, you know, click, click, click. And I'm sure people going into debt, people ordering stuff that's not very good quality. So I don't think just because a company can make a lot of it, I don't know if that's good. I mean, this globalist,
Gutenberg mass-produced Bibles for the first time in history. Would you suggest that was a bad progress for mankind?
This is a great question.
Question.
Thanks for asking. And I'd say you could argue that it was a bad thing for mankind. Gutenberg and the press were directly related to Luther and the Lutheranism and the spread of Lutheranism. That's absolutely factual. So it doesn't mean it was bad necessarily, but it actually did put the Bible into hands of people who could then read it and determine it on their own, rather than have it, you know, taught to them by, retranslated, and rather than have it taught to them by the church. So that's actually could have been a bad thing in terms of the Bible. It's an interesting question. I mean, it happened right at the same time as Luther. And Luther was directly because of the Gutenberg Press, I'd say, in many ways.
Right. So back to boycotts. I guess the question for me here is how do we best work within? I mean, because we're trying to keep our faith, we're trying to live morally, we're trying to do the right thing, and to the extent we can. Yeah, I mean, I know for me, okay, so I'll tell a quick story here. We went out looking for a desk that I could use. We went to a place here nearby called Nebraska Furniture Mart, and when we looked at all of their offerings, and they were terrible. I mean, it was horrible. This stuff was unpurchasable, and we ended up going to some antique stores, and eventually at an antique store we found a nice solid hardwood. It wasn't a perfect fit, but it was a nice solid piece of furniture. And so, you know, that one little act there, you know, I suppose it's not going to have any big consequences, but maybe again, there's the free market trying to work itself through, and perhaps, you know, I don't know what Nebraska Furniture Mart's business model is and who they're selling to, but you would think that at some point they would saturate, they would, you know, start having problems, because it looks to me at least that they're selling a horribly bad product.
Right. And I'd say it's the same with IKEA too. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah.
So I work for Boston Scientific. We create medical devices. So guess which type of medical device is cheapest?
What, like literally what goes into the body, or what do you mean?
Well, that's a leading question, but it's the ones that we mass produce. It's the ones we create lots and lots and lots of.
Yeah.
Why? Because we create lots and lots of them. We have huge efficiencies that we've created over time, and then we don't therefore have to pass on that cost to patients. The ones that are most expensive are the ones that we don't create a lot of. Why? Because we don't have those same efficiencies in place. We don't have those same economies of scale. So that price gets transferred directly to the patient, right? Or insurance companies. And you could have a whole other discussion on that too, I'm sure. But the point is that advancing the way we have advanced is not a bad thing. If you want to live a simpler life, you know, there's people in Alaska who live off the grid and think that that's better. That's fine by me. I have no issues with that. But saying that what we've done as a society is bad by increasing our ability to thrive, I don't buy that.
No, and I think you're definitely right there. I think I'm exaggerating when I say it's a bad thing, but I mean, I guess my question is, the economy of scale, doesn't it often affect the quality of the product? I mean, obviously in your case, no.
Well, in your case, but in McDonald's case, I would say yeah. You know, and I think it, but then there's a market for McDonald's, you know,
exactly,
and
right. If you
know, you got In-N-Out Burger, which for me is a better burger, but and I'm free to go to either one, but as long as there's people willing to go to McDonald's for that burger, then they're going to continue to exist.
Yeah, exactly. If you want a burger that you watched the cow die in your neighbor's yard, It's going to cost a whole lot more, but if it's better for it, if you think it's better, then that's fine. I don't care. But there's, like Dad said, there's absolutely a market for the real quick McDonald's burger. You know, I don't see the issue there.
Because there's a market for it doesn't mean it's good. I mean,
Yes.
I don't. So because, but I mean, I think that's still. I mean, I guess there's the freedom to be able to do it. If someone's going to buy it, then it's good. But look at the society of people. Look at how many fat people there are and sick people there are. Look at how many. I mean, isn't there an issue with our society? And a big part of it is consumerism. I just think that's absolutely the case. It's because people have too much they can buy. They can buy things online. They can buy garbage. There's not a whole lot of thought put into products anymore. There's not a whole lot of thought put into buying products anymore. And I mean, to me, yeah, I'm being ultra old fashioned and impractical. I totally understand that. Truly though, I mean, I'm saying this while I will eat McDonald's, but I'm just saying as a conversation.
Wait, so when do you hang on? Let's stop there for a second. When do you eat McDonald's?
Rarely, but if I'm on the road and I pass one, then I'll eat it. Yeah.
Okay, so why are we even having this conversation?
No, because I think we should think about. I think I should think about it. Why do I mean I shouldn't eat at McDonald's, and it gives me a stomachache. I mean, it tastes good.
You got a double whammy going on.
but I mean, shouldn't we consider this? Shouldn't we individually say, hey, the consumeristic
just don't eat McDonald's
is a problem? Sure,
just don't eat McDonald's.
That's my point.
And if there's enough people who think the same, then McDonald's will go out of business.
Exactly. Right. So the idea that McDonald's exists isn't my problem. I'm saying the idea is that we should consider individually what we buy, what we consume, rather than just it's the easiest, it's the most available, so we should consume it. So because McDonald's has perfected a way of producing a cheap burger, is that necessarily a good thing? I mean, for them it is. They make a lot of money for it. But is it something that is it good? Are we better for having McDonald's in our society?
Yeah, no, I think that we do end up paying a societal cost for it. We end up unhealthier for it, and you know, and it's for me again, it's a personal judgment that that for me, if I'm going to go out to eat, we always shoot above the slop shoots. We almost never go to the slop shoots, and or that like we call it. And so we'll go to a steakhouse or a Longhorn steak and something like that. And so we're going to pay here. We're going to pay $40-$45 for a dinner as opposed to paying $15 at a McDonald's. But that's a value judgment that that we make. Now, would I like to see other people make that? Yeah, of course I would. I would like to see other people, but but can everybody? No, of course not.
Okay, Kevin, I've got a question for you. It's not a judgmental one. It's meant for illustrative purposes. Okay, are you wearing socks right now?
Yes.
Okay. If you remember buying those socks, did you buy the most expensive socks that were at the store when you bought them?
Probably not. Though recently, yes. Recently, yes. But these ones not.
Okay. So does that mean that those cheap socks are bad to have? You clearly could have bought the most expensive socks. You could have bought the non-McDonald's socks, but you didn't, just like I don't. Mm-hmm. So it's really good to have that type of competition and variety.
But yeah, that's true. But how long are these socks going to last? And so shoes is a better example. So I've bought dozens of pairs of shoes, and I'm sure all of us have. And typically, if you spend $20-$30 on shoes, they're going to last you a year, 6 months. I don't know. And then if you go in and you buy more money on shoes, they're going to likely last longer. Not surely, but likely. I mean, people back in the day would buy, one pair of clothes that would oftentimes last them decades. And so the idea again is that the consumerist idea, or the idea of, it's the cheapest, and so I'm going to buy it now. Is that necessarily the best way? It's a way, but
no. What I would say, Kevin, is that and the socks is good example. So let's say that we've done some research, and I won't even throw out a brand name. With some brand name, the internet rumor is that they use Chinese sweatshop and they're made under horrible social conditions. Okay, so we dig into that. We do some research. We find some valid sources, and we confirm. Yep, it really looks like these socks are coming from China, coming from wherever, and they are made under deplorable, horrible conditions. Does that put me under a moral obligation to not buy those socks? I mean, for me, yeah, I would say I would make that personal judgment. Okay, I've come to that conclusion. I would stay away from that brand. I would go and pay an extra 50 cents a sock or whatever it was, or for a pair, and buy the better brand. So I mean, there is, I think, a certain amount of morality that we should bring to this. I just don't know how, I don't know how extensively it goes.
Yeah, I agree
Right.
with that. If you know of something that's relevant and tangible and morally compromising for you, then yeah, sure, you go buy something else. But you know what you couldn't do? You wouldn't have the option to do that if you didn't have competition and large companies and industry that's competing against one another. Because all of a sudden, if you don't have that and you have one mom and pop sock supplier and you find out all of a sudden they're morally compromised, there go your socks.
Right.
You have no more sock options.
Right.
Notice I
mean,
didn't say
that's
stock
obviously
options. I said sock
Sock
options.
options, yeah.
I mean, obviously that's an extreme because I mean, even in a small market, you'd have multiple sock options. But I
Well,
see
aren't
what
we
you're saying.
talking extremes? I mean, we're talking extremes right now, right?
Yeah, we're talking concepts. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, though we know or we have pretty good evidence to say Nike, Apple, you know, Amazon is a little less. I think Amazon, the people don't like working there, but then don't work there. But I mean, these other companies that are produced primarily in China, I think we have very good evidence that they are very, very immoral. At least, I mean, from what I've read, I mean, they're very questionable. At least now, yeah. Again, I think I've probably had Nike, and I've never had Apple, thank goodness. But I mean, that's something that I mean, everyone's different, but I think we should think about it. Look at, I mean, we're all Catholics here, so if we go into a store, and again, I do this. I'm not saying I'm not trying to pull it. I am better than you, anybody. My only point is just to have a discussion about it. I mean, I'm not saying I even change any of this, but I think it's good to talk about because if I go into a store that has a rainbow flag on it, I mean, that's directly against our beliefs and our faith. I mean, I should at least consider not shopping there, right? I mean, I still do. I still shop there in most of these places, and many places have it. And to say that I wouldn't shop there is almost impossible because I think all of our grocery stores have it. But shouldn't we at least consider it? Shouldn't we at least say, "Ugh, I feel a little queasy going in this place"?
Well, yeah, and I think that there are always situations around the margin. I know, Kevin, with you did a podcast quite some time ago now on Amazon, and I think the case that you were making there, which I thought was a pretty good one, was if you can go out to Amazon and do your thing and do the searching, and then see if you find a product from a company, especially a small company like Paul's saying out there, maybe take an extra few minutes and see if you can buy directly from that company as opposed to going through Amazon. It might cost you a little bit more. You might not get it as fast. You might not be able to use Amazon Prime, whatever. But I mean, you can bypass it and go straight to that company. Company probably does a little bit more better profitably. So I mean, if you can make that kind of a buying decision around the margins, those things add up over time.
Sure. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I've got nothing against mom and pop places. I run a mom and pop nonprofit. I am solely dependent on people who like mom and pop nonprofit. So I get it. No issues with it. But my issue is that if you're able to compete as a mom and pop, then great. If you can't, tough luck. You didn't figure it out. And that is really healthy for an economy.
But I mean, if Amazon is a good example that they do have tax breaks and stuff that other companies just cannot get. That they have an uneven playing field that they've earned probably. I don't know how they got it. They have their tax havens in Luxembourg and in Dublin. And so they found ways around the system that's cheating. They directly cheat. I don't think anyone would even disagree with that. Biden right now is trying to change the corporation tax. I think for Amazon and several other companies because they have an uneven playing field, which makes it so that they can just go and bully everybody out of the market. And so if it's all even and equal, I can understand that it's healthy that the mom and pops have to step up their game. But if the mom and pops literally don't have the same playing field, how is that going to change?
Well, and that's a legitimate role of government, right? Is to come in and to be anti-monopolistic and pro. They need to be pro free market and pro competition. And so, yeah, that is a place where I can see Amazon going to a city or a little town and saying, "Hey, we'll double your job base if you give us free taxes." That's one of the ways they do it. And I think on a local base, I don't think you can stop that, nor should you. But if they're getting federal tax breaks, I think especially that's the kind of thing where, yeah, there should be a level playing field.
And I mean, yeah, I guess that's ultimately. I think that Amazon's a big bully who I don't know, it works its way around and pushes other businesses to the ground because they can have the rules as they want them. Once you get to a certain size, I mean, I just feel like once you get to a certain size, you can control the game, right? And you run the bank in the monopoly board rather than being one of the players.
Well, and the question I think is whether what you're offering is something that is how necessary it is, right? If it's the electric company and the electric company has a monopoly, which typically they do, you've got to regulate them to the point that they don't go out and absolutely abuse that monopoly, because you have to have electricity. Okay, when you're talking about Amazon, they may establish somewhat of a monopoly, but it's not monopoly. It's not intrinsically monopolistic what they're doing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Amazon is not a monopoly.
Right.
And
there are other competitors.
Yeah, it's not. But becoming big and being able to throw your weight around in the marketplace is part of the incentive of becoming big. We have U.S. patent laws which protect your patent for 17 years. That's to incentivize people creating patents, getting new ideas out there, improving things, so that for 17 years, you are the only one who can profit off of your idea. It's the same unspoken thing with big businesses. You want the mom and pops aspire, most of them, at least that I know of, aspire to become big so that they can have bigger tax breaks and bigger margins. That's what you want. That's part of the American dream.
But okay, so then why is it the same issue, or maybe a totally different topic for why groceries in the U.S. are so much more expensive than in Germany? Produce, I should say, is really, I'd say, almost half for many things in Germany.
Meat and cheese too.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and I wonder why. I mean, is that because of the regulations here that don't allow for semi-monopolizing, or is it? I don't know. I don't. I think Paul and we've talked about this years ago, and I don't know the answer, but it's interesting.
I don't know either. I mean, pricing models are incredibly complex, but I would guess that it has something more to do with disposable income than anything else.
But would the U.S. have more disposable income than Germans, you think? I don't know. I think it's a very healthy economy.
I think by a lot.
Okay.
I've read it somewhere that we have 5% of the world's population. We do 20% of the spending or something like that. I mean, I think the United States does an extravagant amount of spending compared to the rest of the world. And you're right. I think Paul's got it that to the extent that the grocery stores and trucking and all of the middlemen can charge more for food, they will charge more for food.
And you don't want to discourage that either.
Yeah,
right.
Because you don't want the government coming in.
Yeah, you don't want the government coming in and telling people what they can charge. That's the worst thing you can do. You'll end up with
unless you're the electric company. Yeah,
right.
But I mean, but isn't foods as necessary as electricity, right? So I mean, if that becomes also an issue where people can't afford, buying a leg of pork or whatever, I mean, is that not as necessary as electricity?
Well, it's a very diverse market, though. You got a lot of inputs into it. That's the difference here. Is electricity is one company, one product, and food is extremely diverse.
Okay.
Yeah, and what happens is as soon as that does happen, you've got a company like Aldi that comes in and says, "Hey, we can actually offer way cheaper food than anywhere else," and they just make lower margins than anyone else, but maybe they sell more, or maybe they found a way of becoming vastly more efficient.
That was an interesting thing that we found. When we moved from Denver to Omaha, you have very different cultures. In Omaha or in Denver, you had a handful of big players. So you had King Supers, you had Albertsons, you had Walmart, you had Target. Some of them who basically owned the entire landscape. Out here in Omaha, you have a ton of additional smaller players here. You've got Baker's. Like Paul said, Aldi's has opened up. You have Fairway, and 3 or 4 or 5 different groups, and they all have their little niches, and they're all trying to grab a little piece of the market. But for whatever reason, in Omaha here, they seem to be a little bit better able to get their niche in the market than they are in Denver. I can't tell you exactly why that is. Maybe your farmer type communities, your more rural type communities are more inclined toward low cost type places. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it was an interesting thing to find.
Interesting. And so I guess if all of the Catholics around the US or the world united and say boycotted Netflix, because I think Netflix is another one that I think should be boycotted because it produces, they make bad content. My opinion. So I'm not judging anyone else who has it. I'm just saying that's my opinion. If everyone did that, would that would be an impact, right? I mean, especially if we're saying all Catholics. I mean, shouldn't we, if we don't start with ourselves individually, and if we don't talk about these things, then no one's ever going to boycott, and everyone's just going to go what's the most convenient and making exceptions and stuff. So I guess that's why I wanted to talk about it, because at least make us consider, why are we doing this? And as you can see, my economic brain is about 5-year-old level. But I still think it's an important conversation, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to stand up and say, okay, we shouldn't buy something from this company because it is immoral? I mean, if they do have a rainbow flag, I mean, it's at least questionable. We as Catholics are supporting a company that is publicly supporting a stance that we disagree with. I mean, don't we care?
For me, the real issue here is okay. So we did. I mean, we saw what was going on Netflix, and we did give it up. But so there's strike one for against Netflix. But then where are you going to go from there? You're going to go to Amazon Prime from there, because Amazon Prime's just as bad, and most of these other services are just as bad. So basically, what do? We basically give up TV. Well, and that's kind of what we've done, is we've more or less given up that network based, the internet based TV, and try to stick more to DVDs and whatnot that we can actually control ourselves. But it takes a good amount of commitment, and again, we just don't have the coordination as a people to be able to make an impact on the market is the problem. We can each make our own individual decisions and sanctify ourselves that way. But I think we're long beyond where we can make a difference at a market level.
Well, and I think that should come secondary to just choosing what you think is right to begin with.
Right.
And if enough people feel the same way, it's like voting for your president, right? You shouldn't do it because you think it will have an impact. One vote doesn't. Every one vote matters a lot, but one vote doesn't matter much, right? Gladly, not everyone thinks that, but
that's my point.
But you need to. But you need to. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
It does matter.
It does matter, but you should vote not because you think that one vote will carry the election, but you should vote because you think what you're doing is correct, or at least the best thing that you can do. Right. So if you think that boycotting Netflix is the right thing to do, then do it. And if enough people think the same way, then it will have an impact. But you shouldn't do it because you're trying to stick it to the man and try to hurt Netflix's bottom line.
You're not getting that $12 from me a month.
Yeah, but look what's going on now with the social media space. I think you got a very interesting transformation going on there, where I think Twitter and Facebook have both lost their stocks, have lost a ton of value. People are really starting to see through Twitter and Facebook. I think that it seems like you've got Trump starting now, and Devin Nunes starting to spin up Truth Social, and going through and they're going to charge for their services. They're going to guarantee that there are very few or to no bots, type of things out there. And so you are seeing, I think, a big picture change away from this old social media dynasty to a new up and coming one. And basically where we are now is, look at you fast forward a year, 18 months, and if Donald Trump and his True Social can come out and really deliver a superior product, they will, over the course of time, they'll put the others out of business. And that's the free market working, but it's also a response, I think, to a cry out for more moral, more wholesome content.
Right. And I know it's tough. I mean, I'm a perfect example of being a total hypocrite as I stream to YouTube, which I strictly believe to be a bad company. So
Man, you're
I
just
know
digging on yourself.
I know
more than
I'm totally
big companies
I'm totally
today.
like no one listened to me about anything I'm talking about. But it's really difficult because YouTube's a perfect example of a really conundrum, because I think I don't like a lot of the things they do, but they simply have more people to watch. So if I want to spread my message as someone in the market, who wants to sell something, I'm not making money, but I want views. YouTube has just extremely more opportunity for that than any of the other companies.
So it sounds like you would agree with old Marcus
That what did he say again?
that every action should be judged for the action itself. Right. So
It's-
you streaming something on YouTube is well and good. That's how you should judge it. Strip away all the other stuff. Don't get entangled in how confusing that is, because it's hopelessly confusing.
Except until it gets more clear, if, say, YouTube starts putting on ads, and especially if they put on immoral ads. And we're not that far away from that. On my videos.
Oh, on your videos. Okay.
Which they do. I
sure.
have no
Yeah,
control.
yeah.
I have to pay YouTube if I want to be able to control my commercials. So for sure, I have a Catholic podcast. They want more money, and so for sure they're going to say, "Give us some money, and we won't put certain
I didn't know
commercials on it."
That's how that worked.
Yeah,
pretty strange. But anyway, I mean, I hope at least the conversation has made people think about it. Economically, as you guys say, it's not going to change anything. It's $10 for a billion, that they're making per month. But I think that it still does matter. Like every vote matters. What we do, of course, as Paul said and Dad said, everybody said it matters what we do. We do what we think is right. Obviously, that's the most important. And my main message for the entire podcast is to think about it. Just think about it. I'm not saying don't go. I'm not saying go boycott Amazon or whatever, or Girlcott, but at least consider who you are purchasing it from. If you're buying a laptop, I mean, at least consider it. I doubt I would say I'm not going to buy it because it may be made in China, but I would at least think about it, maybe.
No, I don't disagree with that.
All right, that's the main point.
The morality needs to weigh into your purchasing decisions.
Exactly.
I don't know that it needs to be number one, but it really should buy in. And then you got to ask yourself, at what cost? I mean, I'm going to buy a little jar of peanut butter, and it's going to be $3 more expensive. But this company is a good, wholesome company. Do I want to support this good, wholesome company? $3. Okay. I got to make that decision. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I think that we should be more deliberate in terms of thinking those things through. And that's a good message, I think.
And I think it's also important to support, especially if we know Catholic companies, Catholic or small businesses, small nonprofits like Paul's. I mean, if hey, I want to give to a charity or something, then I think you should even actively search out one that is going to someone that you can trust. I mean, that's a kind of, again, it's a little bit of a different topic. But the idea that when I buy something, I should at least look into it. If my neighbor, if I'm always buying groceries from King Soopers, and because we live out in the country, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, maybe my neighbor is selling fresh carrots and tomatoes from their garden. They're going to be more expensive, but sure as heck they're going to be a lot better. And so, I mean, I guess I just think that for myself, especially, I need to start thinking about these things more. Can I get this from my neighbor or from mom and pop before I go and just always do the easiest, cheapest thing? Because maybe cheapest and easiest isn't always the best option, even though I agree in the end, it is good, as Paul has explained, it is good to have that, and that the free market and and progressive, the progressive market is not a bad thing. So I'm not, down on the Gutenberg Press, guys. That was just that was
or the free market,
or the free market. That's not the point.
We started going down some dark holes. For
That's right. Yeah.
Don't start me on that. But anyway, thanks, guys. I know, Dad, you got to go to a meeting. I appreciate you guys coming on. I would love to continue topics like this. Again, economically, I think I'm going to have Ina come on next time because she could talk about this stuff a lot better than I could. But I think it's good to think about, to talk about, and to have conversations about. So, Dad and Paul, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Good topic.
Kevin.
Thanks,
Paul. Yep.
All right. Yeah.